Hello, my name is CGreer, and this is my presentation over the review of the functional behavior assessment and the functional analysis. I currently work at a clinic for my fieldwork placement. In the future, as a BCBA, I hope to still work at the clinic, but to get more experience with in-home cases. My experience with behavioral assessment is not very extensive. I have been able to create or conduct a functional behavior assessment in a past course, like a mock assessment. I have not had much experience with functional analysis though. Would like to gain hands-on experience with both of these. The study, Functional Assessment and Behavioral Intervention for Eating Difficulties in Children with Autism, a study conducted in the natural environment using parents and ABA tutors as therapists, conducted by Gail and others, explains how functional behavior assessments can be beneficial. So interviews and direct observations were used in the study to hypothesize why challenging behaviors were occurring at mealtime. It was discovered through these interviews and observations that positive and negative reinforcement, as well as escape from unpreferred food items, were maintaining these challenging behaviors. This also allowed for an intervention to be put in place, which was non-contingent negative reinforcement on a fixed ratio of 30 seconds. And all participants were able to reduce disruptive behaviors during mealtime and increase their acceptance of food items. So this study shows us that a functional behavior assessment can be beneficial for understanding why problem behaviors are occurring and for implementing effective interventions to help decrease those problem behaviors and increase more socially acceptable behaviors. The next study that I reviewed aimed to understand how indirect, direct, and experimental methods correlate and if they are able to come up with the same hypothesis of the function of behavior. The study was conducted by Alter and others, and it is called a comparison of functional behavior assessment methodologies with young children, descriptive methods, and functional analysis. So the indirect measures that were used in the study were the functional assessment interview and the motivation assessment scale. The direct measures used were ABC data collection, and then they were compared to the findings of the functional analysis. So the findings were that the functional analysis and descriptive measures correlated 56% on the function of behavior. Direct and indirect, so the FAI and MAS compared to the ABC data collection was 38%. The indirect measures, so just the FAI and MAS, compared to the functional analysis, was 50%. And then the ABC observation correlated with the findings of the functional analysis at 100% for all participants. According to the article, the functional analysis is considered to be the most valid in determining the function of a behavior. When looking at these recordings, we can assume that the indirect method can be unreliable and that direct measure is more reliable in determining the function of a behavior. The next article that we're going to discuss is titled Comparisons of Functional Behavior Assessment Procedures to the Functional Analysis of Problem Behavior, conducted by Romani and others. Just like the last study, this study aimed to determine if the results while using an FBA correlate with the results that we see when using an FA. The indirect measures used in the study were ABC interviews, functional analysis screening tool, and questions about behavioral function. While the direct method used was ABC narrative, so that's going to be data recorded through direct observation. The experimental method used is the functional analysis. It was determined that the function of behavior determined by the FBA correlated less than 25% of the function of behavior recorded when using a functional analysis. FBA function of behavior correlated 70% of the time, though, for identifying at least one function of behavior determined by the functional analysis. This allows for behavior analysts to make a more informed decision on what method might be best if a client engages in a behavior and it is assumed to have more than one function. This is a visual from the Romani article. It shows all 14 participants and the function of behavior that was determined while using each method. And this is just a way that you can see how it correlates with the far right column, which is the functional analysis determination of the function of the behavior. A functional behavior assessment should be conducted when a learner's education is being negatively impacted by challenging behaviors. These challenging behaviors prevent learners from developing new skills at a higher rate than they would if they were not engaging in these challenging behaviors. Just like we saw in the Gale and others article, the child's disruptive behaviors were interfering with their eating. According to Alter and others in 2008, interventions are less likely to be effective if they are not determined according to the function of behavior. So if we're seeing challenging behaviors and we want to decrease them, we have to give clients a way to achieve that same function with a different behavior. And if we don't understand what the function of behavior is, we're unable to accurately give them a replacement behavior. So we conduct FBAs and FAs to determine the function of a problem behavior. But how do we know that a problem behavior is occurring in the first place? So how we determine this is if we have a learner who is consistently engaging in an inappropriate behavior to have needs and wants met, overusing ineffective behavior. We would consider the inappropriate behavior to be a problem behavior. So for example, each time a child wants their mother's attention, they scream loudly. That screaming, that disruption would be considered a problem behavior. Each time a child must leave an area to go to another area, they engage in physical aggression towards the adult that is trying to transition with that learner. That physical aggression would be considered a problem behavior. One more example would be every time a child sees a peer playing with a preferred item, they will engage in self-injury by hitting their head on the floor. That self-injury would be considered a problem behavior because it occurs frequently and they engage in it to achieve a want or a need. Next, we're going to discuss the differences between an FA and an FBA. During an FBA, a lot of focus is on the antecedent and the consequence of a behavior. The FBA gathers information through indirect, descriptive, and experimental methods to form a hypothesis of why a behavior is occurring. These direct and indirect measures can allow for an association between challenging behaviors and the function of those behaviors. This gives behavior professionals an idea of how programming should be used, what interventions should be put in place to help decrease those challenging behaviors. So an FBA differs from an FA because an FA is more of a hands-on experimental arrangement. This allows for behavior analysts to determine the function of a behavior based on manipulating these variables and determining which behavior occurs most often. Some of the variables that are manipulated during this time are access to attention, access to tangibles, escape from demands, and free play absent of demands. According to Romani and others, functional analysis results are more reliable than the methods used to gain information using an FBA. Adjustments should be put in place during FAs because sometimes the behavior that will be engaged in can be harmful or dangerous, and also the behavior may not happen very frequently but is still problematic for the client. So the experimental session should be long enough to ensure that it does capture that behavior that needs to be observed. In my current fieldwork placement, FBAs are used more often than FAs. So when a client shows challenging behaviors, the BCBA conducts interviews, refers to information that was gained from the initial intake of the client. The RBT records ABC data during their sessions to determine what behaviors are occurring what's happening before and after those behaviors, and also take in frequency and duration data on those behaviors. From there, the BCBA makes a hypothesis on what they believe the function of behavior is and implements interventions to decrease that problem behavior and increase more effective behaviors. If they notice that these interventions that are being implemented are not helping to reduce those problem behaviors, then they may take it a step farther and conduct a functional analysis to get a better idea of what the function of behavior may be and to determine if their hypothesis was incorrect or if there may be more than one function of the problem behavior that is occurring. According to Romani and others, a learner's response to treatment should be monitored closely, and determinations on interventions and modifications to interventions should be put in place. I feel like the company I work at does really well with that, as they use FBAs originally, as they are more time efficient to try to make these determinations on the function of behavior, but are willing to do a functional analysis if there is not many behavior improvements being seen with the interventions that they're currently using. So the steps for conducting and using an FBA at the clinic that I work at is, first step, the BCBA interviews the caregiver to understand any concerning behaviors that they're seeing at home and gain information on what happens before and after those behaviors occur. The BCBA then observes the client's behavior for themselves and creates an operational definition. With that operational definition, the RBT then records ABC data on that behavior. While doing this, they are also recording the frequency and the duration of the behavior as well, and this is done on a form, like an ABC chart that is provided at the clinic that I work at. The BCBA reviews the ABC data with the RBT, like outside of session, and asks any clarifying questions and gains more information through that discussion. The BCBA forms a hypothesis of behavior and discusses with the RBT to see if the RBT agrees with that hypothesis. And then programming is put in place to help with those problem behaviors. So in conclusion, I would like to gain more hands-on experience conducting a functional analysis. I would like to see it in real life as it's happening, because I have questions about how to balance enticing a problem behavior versus allowing some free time so that the client isn't in an escalated state for a long period of time. I would also like to understand how to prevent reinforcing the problem behaviors during this functional analysis, and just seeing it play out in front of me, I feel like I could gain that understanding by watching it. Here is a list of the references that I used to create this presentation and the references that I used to learn more about FAs and FBAs. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thanks.